All right, everybody, thanks for joining in. This episode, we are taking a trip back to the golden age of horror, or at least for the two of us. We are going all the way back to the early 80s, 1981 to be exact. In this episode, we are talking about 1981's Hell Night.
And you know, Hell Night is one of those films, going back to the old mom and pop video stores, where, you know, I never saw Hell Night back in the day. And actually the first time I saw Hell Night was last night. But the cover art is one of those, it's one of those cover arts from, you know, the video store VHS boxes that I remember seeing in multiple video stores in the horror section. And I just kind of overlooked it because, you know, I was more of a slasher guy, and it was one of those that I never really checked out back in the day. And then seeing that cover, I was like, oh man, yeah, I've walked past that video like probably hundreds of times back when I was like a kid.
It has one of those very effective cover arts, unlike a lot of the cover arts back in the day that were effective, you know, the ones that got you to like, oh, I'm gonna check this movie out. This movie looks awesome just going off of the cover. The one distinct difference between a lot of the movies and this one is that even though it was kind of a illustration, that it was actually taken from a scene in the movie. Like there's a certain point in the movie where you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what's on the cover. That's cool.
Right.
You know, to where like some of the movies where, you know, I mean, outside of Halloween 4, but there's other movies that you go off of just the cover and you're like, man, this looks great. And then you get it home and you watch it and you're like, this doesn't look anything like the cover art displayed at all. There's that whatever that's on the cover is not in this movie at all.
Right. Yeah. This one, like, you know, that scene is taken right out of the movie. So yeah, absolutely. It's like one of those, and then because I kept thinking to myself when the scene came on in the movie that, you know, is depicted in the cover, I was like, oh, okay, this is it. This is what we saw in the what we see in that picture on that, you know, that poster.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Another thing I want to say too, you know, in terms of who's in this film, some of the cast. Obviously, this is Linda Blair. You know, this is her post Exorcist horror film. I know she did a lot of stuff, you know, after she, you know, became known as Reagan from The Exorcist, and, you know, was kind of typecast into the horror films. So this is her a little bit older. What do you think she is in this film? Like what?
Probably in her young 20s.
Young 20s. Yeah, that makes sense. But another, you know, one thing before we go any further with her, I know you probably have a lot to say about her, but another face that I recognized instantly was Peter Barton.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my gosh, it's the guy from Friday the 13th, the final chapter. And you and I actually had the opportunity to get his autograph a few years back at Flashback. He was there when they had a lot of the cast from Friday Part 4. I think that was the year I got the Ted White autograph.
Yeah, it could have been. Yep. Yeah, that's right. He was there. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Looks, and he's in his 60s now, and gosh, that shows you how long ago these films were.
Yeah, that's one of those faces too. I remember the first time I saw this movie, I was like, "Who? That guy looks really familiar. Who is that guy?" And then it's like one of those things. Like halfway through the movie, you're like, "Oh, it's that. Yeah, that's right. That's that guy. Okay, cool."
It's the guy from Friday 4 who gets his face smashed into the shower.
This movie, when Linda Blair comes on, and you know Linda Blair's in this movie, and a lot of people think of Linda Blair nowadays think of Linda Blair in two different types of situations. One, either you're thinking of Linda Blair in the first Exorcist movie, not the second Exorcist movie, or you're thinking of the Linda Blair now that you see out and about in the conventions and stuff. So either you have like whatever 14-year-old Linda Blair or 70-year-old Linda Blair. And then the Linda Blair that's in Hell Night walks out and you're like, what is that? Reagan's hot.
Yeah, she's matured a bit since the days of her demon possession.
The one thing I will say with Linda Blair too, which I said this to myself like whenever it was 10 years ago or whenever it was when I went to my first flashback in Chicago, because she was there, and it was like the 30th anniversary of The Exorcist, or maybe it was like the 40th anniversary of The Exorcist. I don't remember. No, well, or maybe it was the 35th, because I think it was like 10 years ago when I went to my first flashback. I don't remember.
Gosh, but that long ago.
But anyway, The Exorcist, there was something big with The Exorcist there. Linda Blair was there, and for those of you that don't know Linda Blair, like nowadays, she's like huge into like this animal rescue stuff. So she has like some sort of like animal charity of her own and stuff. I mean, it's all really cool and stuff. But she's also, I don't know if she's like super healthy, or if it's part of the whole stigma with I'm an actress and I have to be super thin all the time. But when you meet Linda Blair, first of all, she's not very tall at all. She's pretty short, but she is like super, super thin in person when you meet her now. And so when like you're watching some of these older movies like Hell Night or Canned Heat, or even like The Exorcist 2 and stuff, and you have that like young, probably mid-20s-ish Linda Blair who's kind of sultry, and there's a couple of them. I think Canned Heat, she's naked in that a couple of times. But you see that and you're like, wow, that is not how I would have pictured Linda Blair to look back in those days. You just kind of forget, and you're like, because I remember seeing her like when I was like a teenager and stuff, and like seeing some of these movies and be like, oh, that girl from The Exorcist, wow, she grew up.
Yeah, things have changed, huh?
So to recap this movie real quick, I mean, because this movie is really, the story is like really short and sweet. So basically, what this movie is kind of you have this, like, I think it's like at a college, I think is where it was supposed to be at. Maybe it was a high school, but I think it was a college. And basically what they did was like kind of like this hazing thing where they had this Hell Night every year, and a selected group of people had to spend the night in this mansion and basically survive the night. And there was like certain rules, like you weren't supposed to drink, and you weren't supposed to have sex or something. Like really weird. And of course the people that are selected, sneak in booze and have sex, but
of course it's an 80s horror movie.
Yeah. But the thing and then of course, then these people are there, and then what is supposed to happen is they have the house like kind of like booby trapped, set up rigged, and they the frat guys behind this are like, gonna like try to scare the people, basically try to get them to see if they can get them to leave. Well, it turns out the house is like actually haunted or whatever. But the thing that I really like about this movie is this is kind of, and we've talked about this before with other horror movies, is this is one of those horror movies where there's really like no real explanation of what's going on. It's just, okay, we're in this movie. There's like zero character development. There's really not a lot of story development. And you're like in the first like minute and a half in this movie, and they're like, all right, guys, you guys got to survive the night in this house. See you in the morning. And it just kind of starts, which I always thought was really cool with this movie. I mean, I know there's other episodes where we talk about how like there's no explanation for stuff, and we kind of bitch about it at times. So, I mean, there are times where you want explanation, but there are other times, too, where in this particular case, it's like, oh, here we go. This is the movie. All right, cool. And it's just off. It's great.
Well, one of my favorite movies without explanation that just kind of tosses you into it is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's one of those films where, you're just introduced to these characters, and, they run out of gas, and they end up at this old farmhouse, and before you know it, this like everything just starts happening, and it's like, wait, what? Who's that? What? And you're like just kind of blown blown away by not knowing what to expect and just this insanity. And although this film doesn't live up to that, what I would call like the level of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this is, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like one of those, here's the story, they're in the house, boom, things start happening, here we go. And it's kind of like this one of those stories, where so they have to stay in this house where this family once lived, and the dad supposedly killed, like he had a bunch of deformed children or something, right? And then one of them survived, and is supposedly, like, the myth is, he kind of reminded me of like a Jason type character, like, this sort of mongoloid type character who's hiding in the walls of the house and surviving and killing people, and kind of a mysterious character.
Mm-hmm. The movie starts with these college kids like partying, and then you have these 4 kids that are dumped into the house, and then at the end of the movie, spoiler, it's kind of our shtick on here anymore, but you get to the end of the movie, and then just kind of how it started at the very beginning of the movie, like, all right, so here we go. Movie's starting, and we're going. At the end of the movie, it's very similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It just gets to a point, and it just stops. And then you're like, oh, okay, the movie's over. All right, cool.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely.
There's no, there's no follow-up. There's no nothing. So
you don't know what happens. Yeah, you just kind of have to take it for what it is.
Yeah, the only thing it's missing is the chainsaw wielding maniac while she's riding away in the back of the pickup truck.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. If we're going back to the end of the film, I thought that was kind of weird because it like ends and then she kind of passes out and then wakes up the next day, and then I don't want to totally give everything away, but like where she was and what happened is kind of just like there still. And then she gets out of the car and starts walking towards the camera. And then that's when the credits roll. And then they play this kind of like early 80s kind of sappy drama, like soundtrack type thing going on. And it kind of reminded me, it took me back almost to childhood, like just watching, I don't know, TV movies and all this stuff way back when. And just, it just totally had that early 80s feel to it.
Yeah, this is definitely, you can definitely tell this is an 80s movie. You have the excessive teenage partying, but there's definitely, kids are drinking, having unprotected sex. And then, one of the things too that they always seem to do in the 80s that they don't really do anymore is the kids would always be using like weird drugs. Cause I remember, weren't they doing some sort of, like the one girl had like, she said she had like some pills or something, whereas like any time yeah, whereas in movies nowadays, if anybody's doing drugs like teenagers and stuff, it's always like, I got some pot, which it's not like oh hey, I got the cocaine and I got the barbiturates and let's go do some heroin in the corner. Like what's going on? That's not a teenage party.
The funny thing about that is, like, I think she did use the term quaaludes as the drug she was using. And the only reason I know about quaaludes is in the Motley Crue book, The Dirt. That's Nikki Sixx talks about that, like, in almost every chapter that he writes about how he used to use quaaludes and how that was a big deal back in the 80s.
I don't even know if those are still around.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that wasn't even anything. I don't remember that even being a thing when we were in high school.
No, not at all. I don't remember that at all. Mm-mm. So yeah, it was something back then. But if you read the book, The Dirt, the Motley Crue autobiography, then yeah, you're gonna hear a lot about it.
That's one topic of discussion that I did not think was going to come up in the Hell Night episode. Was the movie The Dirt by Motley Crue, or the story The Dirt by Motley Crue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's usually Halloween, so... Right,
yeah. I don't think... Oh, you know what? There is a connection to John Carpenter's Halloween. This is a Compass International film with Irwin Yablans, who produced, which is the same guy who produced the original Halloween, who also came up with the idea to call the movie Halloween, because originally it was going to be the Babysitter Murders. And he said, why don't we make a movie about on the scariest night of the year, which is Halloween, and then that's when they changed it. So there you go. There's your connection to John Carpenter and Halloween.
Whew, that was a little bit of a stretch, but we'll go with it. At least you're not gonna say something like Linda Blair was married to some guy in the '80s who like was a set designer on Halloween or something.
Nope, didn't go that far.
I don't even know if that's true or not. It might be true. I don't know. I don't really know that much about Linda Blair, other than in the '80s she was smoking hot.
Yes, she was.
Oh.
You see any recent pictures of her?
Not in the last, but I mean, like I said, when I saw her, whenever it was that flashback, she was just this little tiny, you could definitely tell she was an older lady. She was, she definitely looked her age. Or at least I think she looked her age. I'm not sure how old she is, but I mean, she looked like a older lady, like probably in her 60s, whenever that was.
So it looks like if anybody's interested, the Blu-ray for Hell Night was released in 2018 by Scream Factory.
Oh, cool!
So I love Scream Factory. They got a lot of cool stuff that they add a lot of cool special features and that kind of thing.
I have to admit that as of lately, with having Shudder and Amazon and Netflix and Hulu, and then there's things like Tubi and all of those different places and stuff. Like, I have zero desire to buy like physical copies of movies at all anymore, unless it's on VHS.
Well, the last two Blu-rays that I purchased, I pre-ordered Rambo: Last Blood because I'm a huge Stallone fan and I love that film, and I will watch it multiple times. And I also pre-ordered the new release of My Bloody Valentine, and it looks like they got some extra features, and they've got a slip cover that you can turn around, and it's got new cover art, and it's also got the original cover art, and I'm a huge fan of that movie. That's like one of those B horror movies that just kind of, for whatever reason, I've always been a fan of, and looks like they've cleaned up some of the cut scenes too, which I can't wait to see.
Yeah, it's just crazy because we typically go to Walmart on Black Friday, but like later in the day usually. So after the initial like rush dies down, but they still have like deals going on and stuff. And actually, anymore, we could probably actually even go in the morning if we really wanted to, because I think the rush, nowadays happens like the day, actually on Thanksgiving Day. But anyway, so we always go to Walmart. We used to go to Shopko too, but Shopko's closed. And one of the things that Walmart always has on Black Fridays is they always have a bunch of DVDs and Blu-rays out that are like super, super cheap. And I think that they're different than the ones that you can normally buy, because I know a lot of times, because we've bought them in the past, and a lot of times like you'll get like a Blu-ray and it will just have the movie like on a disc. It won't have like any of the special features or anything, which whatever. But anyway, like this year when we went and like we were looking around and stuff, and there was a couple of like movies that I was kind of like, oh, hey, cool, yeah, that's only $3 or whatever. But then, like, like my wife and kids were like, are you going to get that? I'm like, no. I just watch it online. I don't need to buy it. And I actually put and this was just not that long ago, but because I was running out of space where I keep my VHS tapes, which was right next to where I have my Blu-rays and my DVDs. So I needed more room for the VHS tapes. So I took all of my Blu-rays and DVDs and actually boxed them up, and they're kind of like technically in storage now. To where
really?
Yeah, if I wanted to go watch something on Blu-ray right now, it would kind of be a pain in the ass because I'd have to go dig this box out of the corner, and probably because the Blu-ray I'd want to watch is probably on the bottom, so I'd have to dig everything out of the box. And honestly, I haven't really been buying that many VHS tapes recently over the past probably year, just because I don't really have the time to watch them as much as I would like to, because, I mean, the stuff that I'm going to watch is usually stuff that nobody else wants to watch, so when I want to watch it, I either have to wait till everybody's in bed, or I have to like go in the basement and watch it on the TV and VCR that's in the basement, which this time of year I don't want to do because it's going to be cold in there, down there.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so it's like, like when I get home from work and stuff, I don't want to stay up until 10 o'clock and everybody else has gone to bed so I can watch some tape on VHS. But then, at the same time, I don't want to go into the basement after I've been gone all day and, want to kind of hang out with people. But hey, whatever. So, but back to Hell Night.
Yeah, we're getting there.
So and actually I have Hell Night on VHS, which is pretty cool. I don't remember where I got it or why I got it. I almost want to say I think it might have been, I might have bought it on eBay. And it might have been what we were talking about before, where it might have been one of those things where I was just, because I've done this from time to time where I've just like typed in media VHS and just kind of browsed like the different media tapes that were out there. And I honestly might have come across the cover art from this one and been like, hey, you know what? I remember seeing that in the mom and pop video stores when I was a kid. And I picked it up. That actually might have been what happened.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I don't remember ever watching this when I was younger. And so I remember when I got it on tape, I was like, oh, cool. And then when I put it in, it wasn't familiar at all. So I don't think I ever saw this when I was younger. So I think the first time I saw it was probably whenever I got it a year ago or 2 years ago on tape.
Yeah, it was definitely something I hadn't seen until recently.
Yeah, which is so crazy when you think about it. I mean, think about how many times have you seen, like, say, Halloween or any of the Friday the 13th movies or even any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, And there's so many movies that we haven't seen yet.
Right.
And every time, and I'm still guilty of this to this day. Like if I'm flipping through stuff and, I mean, it's a little bit different now because when you're flipping through like streaming stuff, it's not like you're going to come across Goodfellas like in the first 15 minutes and you're like, oh, Goodfellas is on. I got to watch Goodfellas. That doesn't really happen. But I mean, there's still times where like we were talking about Commando. When we were talking about that movie a couple episodes ago. And, I mean, Commando is one of those movies where, Commando, I'll just be sitting around and be like, oh, you know what? I could go for a little bit of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Alyssa Milano action right now and go grab Commando and throw it on.
Oh, yeah, that's always that's one of those classics that, yeah, you can always have that, be in the mood for that one.
So yeah, but this is one of those movies though when it comes to the horror world. I mean, we talk about beer and popcorn movies all the time, and this definitely falls into that category. This is one of those movies that you don't necessarily need to give it a whole lot of thought. And honestly, this is also one of those movies where you probably don't want to give it a whole lot of thought because I think if you started dissecting this movie, you probably would find probably some flaws with it. So this is just one of those movies you can just sit back, enjoy. You don't have to think about it at all. And you just throw it on and have a good time with it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not something that it's just kind of a kickback, relax weekend movie. It's certainly not I don't think I'd call it even a classic. It's just sort of a B-level 80s horror movie. And if you're looking for that vibe, just, kick back, watch it, have a cold beer and call it a day.
So I'm going to give this one a thumbs up for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and follow you with that. And I was kind of on the fence about this one because I was thinking, well, it's definitely not a film that I'm like, was terribly excited about or thought it was a really well done film, but it was enjoyable enough to kind of give it that like, early 80s horror, again, like we said, just weekend warrior type of film. So I'll give it a thumbs up for that reason.